So this morning I want to talk about forgiveness in challenging times, and we certainly are living in challenging times. And it's during these times when we find ourselves consumed by grief, when injustice is everywhere and suffering is everywhere and it feels insurmountable. It can feel like forgiveness is a pretty impossible undertaking. It sort of comes down to how do we forgive what we feel is the unforgivable. But if we turn to the Buddhist teachings, I think there's a lot there that we can benefit from. Not in the sense of we passively surrender, to acceptance, passively surrender to the wrong in the world or surrender to injustice, but more of a transformative practice that's rooted in our wisdom, compassion, and reduced suffering. And in this sense, forgiveness is a courageous act of letting go, and not letting go of accountability, not letting go of a wish for justice, but a letting go of hatred, of anger, and of the chains that bind us to suffering. One of the most significant barriers, I think, to forgiveness is the misconception that to forgive is to be weak, is to be passive, is to lack resolve in the face of wrongdoing. But from the Buddhist perspective, I think this nothing could be further from the truth. Forgiveness is not about condoning harmful acts. It's not about allowing injustice to continue or persist. But it is about refusing to keep the cycle, to perpetuate the cycle of anger and hatred within ourselves and within the world around us. You remember the Buddhist quoted as saying in the Dhammapada, quote, "Hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is an ancient and eternal law. Hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is an ancient and eternal law," close quotes. So in that sense, forgiveness is really a practice of strength, a practice of wisdom, a practice of clarity. It is grounded in the understanding that holding on to anger, only deepens our suffering, only deepens the suffering of those around us. It is not a pleasant experience. Now, another common misunderstanding about forgiveness is that it diminishes the importance of seeking justice in the world. But again, forgiveness and the pursuit of justice can coexist because forgiveness involves transforming our inner landscape while taking action, wise action, to address harm and prevent its recurrence. And this is not about ignoring wrongs. It's not about looking the other way, but it's about how we hold them in our hearts as we work and strive to correct them. This dual approach, this inner transformation internally with the anger, coupled with outer wise action, is really at the heart of the Buddhist teachings. The Buddha likened anger to grasping a hot coal and with the intention of throwing it at the other person and having them burned. But in the end, it is we who are burned because we're still holding the hot coal. Unforgiveness, the unwillingness to forgive when left unchecked, really locks us into cycles of resentment, rage, and grief. It just feeds on itself. It just perpetuates itself. And these emotions of anger, resentment, rage harden the heart, cloud the mind, narrow our capacity to respond skillfully to life's challenges. Culture teaches us often that anger protects us or fuels our resolve or motivates us, but in truth, it just blinds us to the deeper truths of our interconnection to others, to the deeper truth of impermanence. There's this wonderful story out of, or little anecdote out of Tibetan Buddhism. Two monks are talking years after they've both been imprisoned and tortured, and one asks the other, "Have you forgiven our captors?" And the second monk says, "No, never." And the first monk says, "Well, then they still have you in prison." The story reminds us that holding on to anger, holding on to hatred, perpetuates our suffering. It keeps it going, even long after the harm has been done. We just don't let it go. And in this context, forgiveness, by contrast, is a path to freedom. Freedom from the emotional and mental chains of anger that bind us to the past. Now, in the Buddhist teachings, forgiveness is not just a one-off. It's not a one-time decision. It's an ongoing practice. It's something we bring into our daily lives. And it requires mindfulness. It requires patience. And most of all, it requires a willingness to confront the pain and confusion that arise in the wake of the harm that has been done to us. Okay, we have to be willing to turn toward it and look at it. The practice of forgiveness involves recognizing that anger, hatred, and desire for revenge are yes, they're natural responses to our suffering, but they're not inevitable and they don't have to imprison us. Because through mindfulness, we observe these emotions that arise. We talked about this on Wednesday, without becoming identified with them, which creates space for compassion to rise. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for those who have been harmed, and even, and this is a stretch, even for those who have caused harm. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But one way we cultivate this is through our meditation practice. You know, a common practice in Buddhism begins with asking forgiveness for any harm that may have caused others, intentionally or unintentionally. And I want to emphasize that. Intentionally, or because sometimes it's unintentional, but we ask forgiveness for any harm we have caused others. Next, we offer forgiveness to those who have harmed us to the extent that we are able. Again, we do the best we can with it. It's a high bar sometimes, depending on the harm. And then finally, we try our best to extend forgiveness to others, you know, that others who have harmed us. Okay. These steps help to soften the heart, clear the mind, plant the seeds of forgiveness. All actions, remember, all actions in terms of the Buddhist teaching, be they good or harmful, arise from causes and conditions. This teaching, you know, we've talked about it in the past, which is known as dependent origination, helps us understand that those who commit harm are often, if not always, acting out of their own suffering, their own ignorance, their own delusion, the three poisons. Now, this doesn't excuse their actions. We sometimes mistake understanding why they caused harm for excusing it. It's not true. We can explain it without excusing it, but it does provide a context for understanding the harm that others cause. And so we try to see beyond the surface of others' harmful behavior to the deeper causes and conditions that shaped it. So what we're really trying to do is separate the harmful action from the person who committed it, recognizing their shared humanity even as we hold them accountable for their actions, even as we hold them accountable. And forgiveness does not negate the need for justice. We still think we need and pursue justice. In fact, it helps us. It helps clarify. It helps us enhance our ability to seek justice with clarity and compassion. You know, anger and hatred often go to retribution, which just keeps it going. You know, I hit you, you hit me back. I hit you again, you hit me back. Okay. And this is so predominant in our world today. Forgiveness, on the other hand, allows us to approach justice from a place of wisdom and equanimity. So let's just take this distinction between rage and outrage. You know, rage is reactive, it's narrow, it's destructive, whereas outrage is sometimes more thoughtful, more proactive, more clear, and committed to lasting change. Because forgiveness empowers us to act from outrage rather than rage, focusing on solutions that intend to bring about greater peace and harmony. Now, forgiveness is not just an act of compassion toward others, it's also an important act of self-compassion. You know, when we let go of anger and resentment, when we drop that hot coal, we liberate ourselves from the mental and emotional burdens that weigh us down. Anger is a tough thing to hold on to. It causes us suffering. It impacts our physiology, our bodies. So we really want to bring some self-compassion as we try to move past it. Because when we do that, it creates space for deeper connections with others. Anger really, really gets in the way of connecting with others. Forgiveness fosters empathy, it fosters understanding, and it fosters reconciliation. Now, again, in forgiving, we don't lose the memory of what happened, but we transform our relationship to that memory, to that story. We honor the truth of the harm and the pause it caused, but we don't let it define us. We don't let it dictate our future behavior. And in this way, forgiveness is a profound act of courage and humility. It's an act which acknowledges the reality of our suffering. We're not minimizing it. We're not saying it doesn't happen, but it affirms our capacity to transcend that suffering. And again, forgiveness here is not a passive or naive act. It's not just, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. It is a radical practice of freedom, compassion, and wisdom. Because it asks us, it requires us to face life's most difficult moments with an open heart and a clear mind. We don't want things that are muddling up, our emotional life. Because we trust that even in the face of what may seem unforgivable, we have the capacity to transform suffering into peace. Again, as the Buddha taught, hate never dispelled hate, only love dispels hate. And in choosing forgiveness, we break the cycle of anger and retribution, and we create conditions for healing. If not in the relationship, if that's impossible, at least within ourselves. Forgiveness does not erase the pain of the loss. It doesn't erase the reality of injustice. This is not some Pollyanna, oh, everything's going to be hunky-dory, but it does offer us a way forward. We honor the past without being imprisoned by it. We seek justice without perpetuating harm by retribution, by revenge. And we meet life's inevitable suffering with greater courage, with greater compassion, with greater grace. Because in forgiving, we not only free ourselves, but also those around us from the chains of hatred and division. We plant the seeds of peace for future generations. And boy, does the world cry out for that now. So those are some thoughts this morning on forgiveness during challenging times. Get rid of this.